has been said that many men have found their way through the valley of violence to the palace of wisdom. But if all men must learn wisdom tomorrow from violence today, then who can expect there will be a tomorrow?
Welcome to an all-new, The Archeology of Dark Shadows. Barnabas, Quentin and Dr. Jekyll's Son was the 27th in a series of paperback books by Marilyn Ross. It also has the dubious distinction of having been released in April 1971, which is the same month that the TV show went off the air. And I remember being very happy and very surprised in mid-April 1971 when I walked from my house over to Cunningham's drugstore on the Dixie Highway in Bridgeport and started looking through their book rack to see if there was anything I'd be interested in, and there was that. I thought the book series was done too, and there was that book, and I was excited because I could continue to follow the adventures of Barnabas, Quentin, and the crew, although in this particular case, not so many from the series are in it. But at any rate, the story is set in the bitter cold January of 1908. Now, the cast of characters is both compelling and believable. And remember, this series is not set in the same timeline as the television series, so there are not very many similarities between the two. There are only two characters that I was familiar with that came from the TV show, Barnabas and Quentin, and then there was a mention also of Angelique, everybody's favorite witch, who, of course, she was mentioned as the curse was being Barnabas's curse was being briefly explained. All of the settings are familiar from the TV show, except the addition of an old stone family chapel, which I thought was a really neat addition to the buildings there on the Collins estate. And this chapel is richly Gothic, and it has a secret to it that we'll talk about a little bit later on in the video. Chapter 1 established the current residence at the Great House. Head of the family was Charles Collins and his wife Rebecca, and they were elderly. They had two adult children, Frank and Emily, and a foster daughter that they adopted named Ada. And also there on the estate living was Stephen, who was Charles's alcoholic younger brother. And there existed a great deal of tension on the great estate in January 1908. When in Chapter 2, Barnabas and Henry Jekyll arrived for a stay at the old house, the tension level soared. Charles held Barnabas with great contempt and lack of trust, and he was not happy to see him return to Collinwood. Now, Henry Jekyll is the son, of course, of the infamous scientist and his counterpart, Mr. Hyde. The junior Jekyll hoped to set up a practice in Collinsport where the father's past was likely unknown. But it didn't take long, and his secret was out. And one thing that spreads really fast in any small town like Collinsport is the local gossip and news. So the good doctor was not without his charms, though, as Emily fell in love with him despite her father's displeasure with that. He didn't think that Henry was a good one to be involved with. Henry explained about his past and blackouts that he has, and he worried that during those times he might be acting out Mr. Hyde's horrendous crimes, but Emily loves him all the more. More mystery as a stranger, Paul Theron arrives with the claim that he is a private detective. Now, while not revealed until later in the book, Paul Theron is actually Quentin Collins in disguise again. However, Ada and Stephen have their suspicion as to Paul's true identity. They kind of recognize him as being Quentin Collins. Then, late one night, Emily hears howling out on the estate in the distance, and remembering the legends of Quentin's werewolf curse, she begins to wonder if it's a dog that she's hearing, or if it is the werewolf Quentin, since some believe that he is back. Now the fear factor goes full tilt as the next morning, Susie, the cook's aide there at Collinwood, is found murdered on the grounds. And it doesn't take long, and the police are out all over the place searching for the killer. Now the murder emulated the way Mr. Hyde had killed his victims in London, and that cast a powerful shadow of guilt, or possible guilt, over the junior Jekyll. But he admits to Emily that he had experienced another blackout about the same time that Susie was murdered. So let's take a look, and I quote the book. Emily speaking. Barnabas told me you had a spell early in the evening, and Henry Jekyll's face was a study in despair as he told her, "You haven't heard the whole story. I had a second spell after midnight, a complete blackout of memory, and Barnabas found me wandering in the snow near the old house. It must have been near the time that the servant girl was murdered." End quote. Now, next we are in the Gothic Chapel, sort of isolated from the main house, back and kind of obscured by trees and shrubbery and such. Now, this is an interesting setting because next we are at the Gothic Chapel, sort of isolated from the main house by trees and shrubbery and such. It's a dark and foreboding structure. Now, Henry Jekyll and Emily are discussing in the chapel his possible guilt, and then he tells her about Barnabas's curse and about Barnabas sleeping in a coffin. And he doesn't only tell her, he takes her to the cellar of the old house and shows her Barnabas sleeping in the coffin. For anyone else to do that would have been a death sentence in any time band. But I don't know. The Barnabas in this book seems a little more trusting. He seems to trust Dr. Jekyll, and he seems to trust Emily. Now, then he takes her to, as I said, to actually view Barnabas in the coffin. But guess what? Guess what? Selfless heroine that Emily is, she bares her neck in a late night meeting in her bedroom and lets Barnabas have his way with her throat and her vital red fluid. My. I don't know. What can you say about that?
Listen, you are so dumb. You are really dumb. For real.
Okay. While this is going on, Ernie, a stable boy, went missing, but was later found dead and mutilated in the style of Mr. Hyde's crimes yet again. So far, Henry Jekyll, Paul Theron, and / Quentin, Barnabas, and Stephen are suspects. Do you think it was any one of them? Well, let's continue and find out. In light of all this, Emily remains committed to Henry's innocence, as well as Barnabas's, and likely, with good reason, was really pissing her dad off big time over taking their part. At another meeting in the chapel, Emily tells Quentin her theory of Stephen being the killer. Concerned for her safety, Quentin reveals a secret that the chapel holds. Here we go, folks. Behind the organ, a wooden panel hides a tunnel that leads from the chapel to the main wine cellar at Collinwood. Hardly anyone knows about it, and if trapped at either end, it would provide a safe avenue of escape for her. Unfortunately, the device was not really used in the story, so I don't know why Ross made a point of bringing it up, but he did, and it made Quentin look like he was very concerned, which he actually was concerned about Emily.
And you'll never show your face where I shall ever have to look at you again.
I swear.
You don't have to take an oath.
Oh!
So, Sheriff Donovan, after a great deal of questioning, has narrowed the suspects down to two, Barnabas or Henry. He's convinced it's one of them. Despite the two murders plans for the annual skating party on the pond behind the stables continue, and the sheriff was in hopes the killer would put in an appearance and perhaps be caught. Now, Emily is attacked on the 3rd floor of Collinwood by a very ugly little man who pushed her down the flight of stairs, but she survived. Now, the skating party is indeed a success, with many locals attending. Even Charles and Rebecca joined the festivities for a short time. And Stephen did not attend, though, as he was drunk, and nor did Ada, whose love and concern for Stephen made her stay home with him to take care of him. Even though the police were present, the killer struck, and they didn't make out too good, because in a surprising twist, Frank Collins was found in the bushes where he was brutally murdered, again, totally mutilated. And oh yes, and Henry Jekyll did not attend, as he had another blackout. Things were looking very bad for the doctor. Chapter 12 brings it all together nicely, but with a lot of suspense. After learning of her brother's murder, Emily seeks solace at the old house. She and Barnabas are concerned that the whole house of cards could fall around Henry at any moment. Even they are beginning to doubt that he did not commit the murders himself. So, they were losing faith in him, and right then Henry returns, dazed and covered in blood. All of a sudden the killer is revealed, though, to be, should I tell you or should I not? In case you might read it. What the heck? It turns out to be Ada. Yes, I suspected her, or Emily, from the beginning. The foster child. But why, after all the Collins family's kindness to her, would she do this? Well, Charles and Rebecca adopted her after Ada's father had committed suicide. Charles had caught him stealing from the Collins business, and Ada blamed them for her father's suicide, and that hatred grew over the years. When Henry Jekyll arrived, she knew who he was and saw this as her chance for revenge. So I hope you enjoyed that little recap. I want to tell you, the Dark Shadows books by Marilyn Ross have been reprinted on high-quality archival quality paper, and they are reasonably priced. They are available on Amazon, and so if you'd like to read the book yourself, it's well worth the read. Then also, it has been released on CD with Catherine Lee Scott, who played Maggie Evans in Dark Shadows, and many other characters, reading the actual novel. And that's kind of interesting too. You might want to check that out. Or you can always seek out a copy of the original, which I did, and was glad that I did, because now it's in my collection. Again, I hope you enjoyed this. Next time that I come to you on the Archeology of Dark Shadows, I want to take a look at a character simply that I will call Old Mordecai. And he is one of the most fascinating small characters, in my opinion, to ever appear across the many media that Dark Shadows was in. Alright, thanks so much for stopping by. I hope you enjoyed it. Love y'all much, and I will see you again real soon, God willing.